I am on.
Hey, man, I'm on too. Happy OTXNT Thursday. It's another one here to celebrate. You doing all right?
I'm doing well. Yeah, just getting caught up on all this stuff and excited to dig into the crazy world that we live in, huh?
Yeah, very crazy. And it seems like things keep getting crazier. So today's going to be a little fun, right? Because we started with a part one. And you and I both knew that there was not going to be just a part one, but we said what to do about Disney. And so we'll hit it up today, but today's going to be a little bit interesting. Is there an agenda? Is there a something that we need to be wary of as families when it comes to just what we do with entertainment and our kids? So um, I think that's a good one to talk about today. I'm going to read some of the articles as we get there, but I think it's going to be a fun conversation to have.
Yeah, I think it's important. We live in this kind of myth of neutrality that everything's just kind of in an area of gray, and that just do your best. But the devil's active, and he has an agenda. And some of these corporations and family friendly corporations like Disney are announcing their partnership on that agenda. And of course we'll flesh that out. But that is something that I think people need to be aware of. We're getting far enough down the road where it's kind of nice because things are at least clarifying, where we can identify the good guys and the bad guys in the midst of God's plan. So,
For sure. Well, you going to start us off, and
yeah,
we'll just hop in.
well, let's pray. We need some wisdom on this topic because it is one that touches a lot of us. So,
Yeah.
please join me. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever and ever. Amen.
Amen. So, okay, since we left off last time, we were talking about really our conversation about what to do about Disney started with Disney became political. Now, that's not a shocker. They have always been somewhat, but became very much out there talking about, hey, we want to come against the bill in Florida, which was just saying, hey, we're not going to talk about any kind of sex stuff with K through third. We're not going to bring that into the classroom. And then they came out and said they're angry about the Texas thing, which is trying to make transitioning at a young age something is a lot harder to do. So that was kind of what that initial discussion. Some of those details are even fuzzy to me because that's not as front and center as what came out like pretty much a couple days after we made the first video, which was, so since the first video, there was the guy who had leaked the Zoom calls of Disney executives talking about their what they're doing right now. And so there was one that I've got some of the kind of comments that were said in this Zoom call. And so there was this, I guess it was called Disney's Reimagine Tomorrow Summit. And so these are people talking about what's going on with their content and what they're doing. And so one other person who was recording this call said, I love Disney's content. I grew up watching all the classics. It's been a huge they have been a huge informative part of my life. But at the same time, I worked at small studios most of my career, and I heard things like, they won't let you show this in a Disney show. And I'm like, okay. So I was a little sus when I started, but then in my experience was bafflingly the opposite of what I'd heard. In my pocket of Proud Family TVA, the showrunners were super welcoming. Meredith Roberts and our leadership team over there has been so welcoming of my not at all secret gay agenda. This person went on to talk about saying how it was her goal to add queerness wherever she could, whether it was having two characters kiss or having a queer character. And she said this too, and the thing was, no one could stop me, and no one was trying to stop me. So that was kind of the first one. Then there was they were talking on that same call how even at the parks now they've dropped ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. They're not going to use gender there anymore. There was the person talking about some of the new shows coming out that are going to be more transgender focused, and the desire to have like a large percentage of queer and transgender representation in their shows. So this was to me kind of the wake up call, I think, for a lot of people to recognize, like, you don't think that people are having I guess when you sit and think, I'm just watching a movie or I'm just watching a show, what most people don't think about are the backroom discussions like this about what is intentionally being put in as a result. And so I think this has been a good wake-up call. I think people are going to ask, okay, so what should I do? Because this further makes it a little more complicated for people who are on the fence about what to do. Because now you're saying these people have said, as long as they're in the driver's seat, they're going to drive this ship to have values that are completely opposite of biblical values. So where are you at on that? What do you think so far?
Yeah, I think from the horse's mouth, we've heard there's an agenda. I heard an additional call that they were talking 50% of the characters identifying either with minorities or LGBTQIA plus. And then one of the things that struck me was the just candid nature of the conversation with regard to transgenderism and needing to have more main characters that are LGBTQAI plus. And the initials are hard to maintain. They keep growing. But the idea there is that a transgendered character looks like a man or a woman. And so you can't necessarily determine that they are transgendered. So they need to have more of a plot focused on those characters in order to make it very clear and abundantly obvious to the viewer that this is what we're highlighting. And so where Disney has tried to maintain some things kind of in secret, or subtle cues here and there, a kiss in the background, that kind of stuff, they're talking about bringing it to the forefront. And so at the same time, they still want to present themselves as a family-friendly organization, an organization that is built to support families and entertain families. And so that's why Disney is kind of in the limelight here, because it's not as though this is just a generic brand that reaches all people. No, it's a brand targeting American families and really the families of the world at this point in time. So when those two things come in conflict, we have to then make a decision. Am I going to support Disney now because this is what their agenda is for my kids and my family, or am I going to steer clear of Disney and say, I'm just not going to give you that opportunity to influence my family?
Yeah. I think you're right on that. I think that's the shocker for them, because it used to be that you could say, hey, if it's a Disney movie, we're going to watch only Disney. Like, I don't even remember, what was that, maybe 10 years ago, saying if it's Disney, that's going to be kind of the standard, right, of what I'm willing to show. Even some groups, like if you have a set of student groups, you're having a movie night or something like that, and you're like, if it's a Disney one, but like that can't be anymore. Now, here's the problem, right? Is because this is not just a Disney thing. Disney's just gotten caught in terms of saying it, or they don't care that it's out, that they're saying it, right? Is that this is in everything. And that's why it is hard. Like we said in the first one, is like to where to jump to, because here's the deal. The agenda is there in everything. Everything has an agenda. Every film has an agenda. Every show has an agenda. There's a point to what they're trying to do. For the most part, there are very few that are still there that are just saying, I'm just here to entertain. Right. That for the most part that's gone. There's something behind everything. And I think people forget that. So I think part of what I was thinking about with this is we need to recognize that biblically that there is a spiritual war that's going on. I think a lot of times we read things like Ephesians 6 and we talk about, that like he says, put on the full armor of God so that you can stand against the schemes of the devil. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against rulers, against authorities, against cosmic powers in this darkness, against spiritual forces in the heaven. And I think we affirm that as Christians, but then like the question is, how is it that is going to manifest itself? And I don't think that the answer is it's just going to manifest itself by you encountering demons, right? That the schemes of the devil, right? That what are we really talking about? That he's got this plan of what he's trying to do, his craftiness of what he's trying to do. And that's as old as what happened in the garden, just to start to question, did God say, to trick you to finally kind of buy into the lie? And so, we need to recognize that Satan has an agenda. And his agenda is to pull people away from God. And that agenda is in entertainment. It's everywhere that you go, that will be the struggle to pull you away. And so I think we need to recognize that we're not just dealing with entertainment. We're not just dealing with politics, like everything. I think everything is connected. Satan is called sometimes the God of this world, and he has his plan that he's enacting, whether it's politics, whether it's government, whether it's like, entertainment, but he's getting his way to put in to mess people up. And so I think we need to take that in mind. It's like, it's not just when I go outside my doors of my home that I have to worry about the spiritual struggles, right? It's right. What's coming in from my television, what's coming in on the tablets. And that's a whole nother thing I want to talk about at some point, which is, parents, what are you doing with your tablets? What are you doing with YouTube and computers and your kids? What is that going to do to them? And we talked about that just briefly already. But those are kind of things that I feel like this is it's evidence of something much bigger going on.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think that that's the key, is that the myth of neutrality is over. Too many Christians believed that we were in a Christian nation, and because of that we could just get along with culture because we were all Americans, we were all Christians, and everything was just connected in that way. And so public education, well, there's nothing wrong. We're just teaching them reading, writing, and arithmetic, and that's just a neutral thing. And we realize that within the schools, there is a hard agenda that is increasing promiscuity, increasing sexual activity at an early age, and increasing normalization of homosexuality and other things. And so it's not neutral. And corporations that we've loved that claim to be, hey, we're just entertaining kids with great stories and uplifting themes, it's not. It's not neutral, and it's not necessarily even positive. And so Christians and Christian parents need to wake up to the reality that something has shifted. And I think that we should be grateful for this, because the shift exposes the lie. And we've been buying a lie for 50 plus years, that all of these things are just neutral, and nothing's too serious, so you just discuss things with your family if you don't disagree. And the old adage of no one's forcing you to watch anything and that kind of stuff, it's fading, and it's going to put Christians in a position to decide, are we going to make a stand or are we not? And we've been folding with culture so long. I think we're at a really strong crossroads here. And part of the thing too is promiscuity among children, sexuality among children. It is a very dangerous thing. It's something that I'm very concerned about, especially in regards to, it seems like an uptick in pedophilia and problems going on there. I think that's something we should be worried about, and certainly not contributing to with our culture, but also just the care that God has placed in our as parents over our children. Jesus says that anyone causes a little one who believes in me to sin, it would be better for him to have a great millstone fastened around his neck and to be thrown into the depths of the sea. Jesus loves these children. And if you take a godly child and you expose them to evil, you cause them to sin. Well, what are we trying to do with normalizing an agenda? We're trying to set up a lifestyle of sin, because the devil, I think, works in a couple of ways. One way is to focus on lies and deceit doctrinally and trying to pull you away. But another way is to catch you in a sin. And so by normalizing this at an early age, we create a greater opportunity to trap people in sin and normalize it in the culture. And I think that that's where we're headed. But the opportunity is really exciting, because if we make a stand, we can really start creating a counter-Christian culture.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so here's the deal, man. Then there's a whole nother set of people who are going to say, well, hey, look, we're supposed to be in the world, and lights in the world, right? Even though we're also said to not be of the world, right? But we have to live here. And so we don't need to be like we don't need to be like a bunch of monks and withdraw. We should be lights in the community. And so they would say, why are we making a fuss about this? Why are we trying? We're going to lose our credibility to be a witness when we're seen as all these things that we're against.
Right.
So what do you say to that when somebody says to you, no, we don't need to be, this is the world, they just don't understand, and we just are seen as a bunch of legalists, when we say, hey, I really have some big issues with now watching Disney with my kids?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I would kind of work backwards from the standpoint of what hill are you willing to die on? You know,
From that perspective, I don't think many or any.
yeah, well, and I think some of us do. It's just that what those hills would have been 10 years ago are now the ones we're compromising on, because we never kind of said where the line in the sand is, where the moment of, if sacrificing your kid to Molech, is that a hill to die on? Maybe some parents today would say, yes, I'm not going to roll my child down into the furnace that is the god Molech. All right, well, from there to where we are now, what are the hills in between, and which are the ones you're going to make a stand on? Because when you start doing that, you realize that culture is moving you and desensitizing you to hills that you would have died on 10 years ago. And now those hills seem to be not that big of a deal. And that's how Satan works. He's very patient. And so that's kind of how I would respond. I don't really care if the world thinks I'm credible all that much. If I'm teaching the Bible and standing on the word of God, he thinks I'm credible, and that's what matters. And the Holy Spirit will validate the message. So that's also an error in judgment to try to say somehow I have to make the world like me in order to have a witness. No, the world will like us because we're the best citizens. The world will like us because we are people of integrity and we have virtue, and that's recognized universally. But they'll hate us for the stands that we make, and Jesus promised that. So I would say, pragmatically thinking, look at what are the hills, look at the trajectory that we're on. Tell me when you'll get off this train, which stop is the final stop for you, and write that out. And then tell me how you intend to keep the train from going there. And that's where we're at right now. If we don't make stands today, the train has already been set. The agenda is set. And because of that, if we don't stop it today, as it gets momentum, it's going to be harder and harder to stop the further it goes down the road.
So, I think this is interesting because my mind, as you're talking, is making me think about the book of Maccabees as we talk about what was happening with what's happening to Israel when the Greeks came in, right? And you begin to think about that there was this total wiping away of of Jewish culture, and then beginning to change what they believed, change what they were involved with, begin to go from things that were important to them to now there's all this pressure to become more like everybody else. And they recognize, like, eventually a lot of that culture just goes that route. And eventually there were people who said, we're not going fully. And there were things that eventually are going to snap you. But you're already seeing that. You're already seeing this cultural begin to clamp down on the church and say, what are you going to do about it? But you do, one of the things I'm always fascinated about in the Maccabee story is how many people are on the side training their kids, that they're still secretly, that right now there's no problems to do this. Right now, it's not a problem to say, I'm going to go against the agenda and I'm going to do what I'm going to do for the sake of my family. That's not problematic yet. I don't think that we are beyond. I think that those days are possible. You already see them in other countries to where you're saying, I'm going to take on the education of my child. I'm going to be able to share with them. That is a problematic thing, which I think brings to the point if people are asking, like, if this is such how do we view this as a profitable scheme of the devil to be one to focus so much on sexuality and identity and gender in children, and put that all over TV? Like what does that actually do? Well, I think what that does is it begins to, especially with people who don't know the Lord, it just it furthers the snowball effect of just our depravity. I mean, you follow in Romans chapter 1, it just continues to snowball, and God continues to hand them over, and it just seems like things are get kind of worse and worse and worse. But I think the other piece of that is, if you look at the Old Testament, I think one of the primary ways in which people are, not primary way, but maybe I'll say this is like a major tool for stripping people away from the faith is through sexual activity. Yeah. And so you'll look at like the Balaam stories. If you remember, Balaam is the prophet in the book of Numbers. Every time he tries to curse them, but he can't. God gives them a blessing. And so then you get this weird story in chapter 25. It ends in 24. Chapter 25 happens. It says, while Israel is staying in the acacia grove, the people began to prostitute themselves with the women of Moab. The women invited them to sacrifices to their gods, and the people ate and bowed in worship to their gods. So Israel aligned itself with Baal of Peor, and the Lord's anger burned against Israel. And what you find out is that this was a plan that was actually hatched by Balaam. So even though he couldn't do it, he still got paid later on, because what he ended up doing was saying, hey, you want to know how to really trip these people up? Bring out your Moabite women. Right. And bring out. So it was Moabite women. It was Midianite women that they were bringing into the midst of the people. And the point was, if I can get them connected and tied in with the sexual activity, then it's an easy step from there. You've made the break. And now it's the next step. Let's go into this. And I think that's part of that, too, is with our people, it's very easy that once I can make the break with sexual activity, how many people do you know, like, who, they say they were followers of Christ, but then they got super wild and became over sexualized, and they just stopped. And part of that might be out of guilt, out of, they've just realized, I want to live my own way, and I don't want God's way telling me what to do. I think that's a big draw. But the other thing I think it does with kids is it begins to strip away identity of for a family, especially. So especially if you're a family that says, hey, we're traditional and what we believe, and you begin to push that into your kids, and what you begin to see is the divide starts to take place. So not only are you sending your kids towards a spiral of immorality, but you're also seeing this breakup of the family, in that now you're going to leave the old Puritans in the background. And we're going to go and free ourselves, and we can't live like this. And you guys are just, and it's not just that we have a difference of opinion anymore. Right. It's that you must hate us and not love us because you don't hold to what I hold to. And that's a very, very dangerous place.
And what's really, really seductive and terrible about the current, the LGBTQIA agenda, and of course, I got to be a little careful because we're on social media, but we'll have to see what happens. When a Christian comes out and you find out that two Christians in your church were sexually active, right? A guy and a girl, there's an intention there that they'll probably get married or could get married. And so there was a tendency in the church, and still is, to kind of overlook that. Or let's separate them, or let's get them married. But these things happen. But nobody runs around saying, I identify as a fornicator. Like that, I'm super excited about this identity. It's looked at as a negative, not a positive. And it's something that the hope is that it will be rectified, and God will forgive. But it's viewed as sin. In this new morality, we give identities to these activities, and to judge the activity is to judge the individual who identifies with the activity, and to dehumanize them, take away their individuality, their personhood. And so what happens there is, the reality is the Bible identifies people that are in regular sin as adulterers and fornicators and the such. So God does see an identity tied up with sin, but as Christians, we try to separate those identities and say that you no longer have to be an adulterer. You can confess and be made right, and God will forgive you. The other side is saying, no, we want to honor the identity. We want to create that identity and lock it so deeply into who you are, that in order for you to get anywhere near the gospel, you would have to reject everything that you have defined as who you are. And so it creates this extra barrier, a significant barrier to conversion and salvation. And then we build a community. Satan has his own community around groups. And this community means that you're going to have to sacrifice that group that you have kind of rejected the world to be a part of. They're the only one that understand you. And in order to be saved and turn away from sin and repent, you're going to have to reject your identity, who you believe you are, and the friends and the community you've built around yourself, in order to go to Christianity, which you've been told your whole life is the most hateful group of all, because they don't accept your identity. And so it's different, and it's much more sinister than other sins, But Satan couldn't have got us this far down the road without beginning with more common sins, more of the sexual sins that you see. So we had to go through the 60s and the 70s, watch the divorce rates collapse. We had to go through the 90s, 2000s, and now in 2020s, it's not the LBG, it's the T leading the way. And if you kind of look at the Genesis account, that takes us back to the very beginning of God created them male and female. And so it's the very first created order that is being disordered now, that God has given you an identity of gender tied to sexuality. And now we can reject the very first gift of God. And so, the only, again, talking about that train illustration, what's down the road from here, it's very scary because it can only go so much further before you've brought in every type of sexual behavior imaginable in regard to either children, pedophilia, or bestiality. I mean, we're getting to a point where it's going to be fair game because we've, even incest right now is being viewed as something that's not that big of a deal. So again, what hill are you going to die on?
Yeah.
Because it's not just like this group is going to passively live their life and let you live your life. They're taking over the entertainment industry, and not them, but the movement that is moving, this great cultural movement is going in this direction. And so it's going to confront you in every aspect of life. And part of me says good, because it's going to force us to really decide who's really going to follow Jesus or not. But on the other side, it's going to make it really difficult on our kids in the next generation. And if we made a stand today, we could create opportunity for harbors, safe places to revive, because we're in the minority. I think when you tie the whole alphabet together, we're on the minority of people who think the Bible says certain things are right and certain things are wrong. And so, yeah, it's very tricky. I think Christians need to make a stand. But I will say this, Disney's like the best, right? Disney's just the creativity. I went to the Star Wars land not too long ago, and it was amazing. Yeah, it was pretty cool. But I also went to the Ark, and I went to the Creation Museum. I was in Kentucky. Incredible, amazing, just well done. The entertainment value wasn't the same as the Disney entertainment value, but the teaching value was way better. And we have groups like that are doing things. And if Christians moved their money, if everybody that had a Disney Plus membership went and got an Answers in Genesis membership, who I do not work for, and I'm not trying to make a profit in any way, imagine what Answers in Genesis could do if they had that type of income swing. This is a group that's already committed to excellence and doing things that are beyond normal imagination. It would create an incredible opportunity. And Christians, instead of waiting and saying, oh man, we lost another, where's the young businessmen and entrepreneurs who are going to create great artistic ventures and places where we can have the best? And with technology, you don't need as much as you used to need to create these upstarts. And so there's a lot of opportunity here, but it begins with Christians saying, I'm pulling my money out and I'm going to prayerfully redirect it.
Let me say this though, too, because the answer is not, I'm going to pull my money out, I'm going to put it in conservative causes. Okay. Do I think a conservative place to park for now for entertainment, if they are making it, like I saw, there's outlets that are trying to do this, right? But I don't think the answer for the Christian is find politically conservative people who are aligned like me to put my money into places like that, because ultimately without Christ, you're not going to get the values of Christ. You're not going to. Yeah. And so you got to be mindful even of that. So I don't think the answer for any of us is say, well, okay, I can't trust Disney. I can't trust Nickelodeon or NBC or any of those the big networks. I just got to go find the little guy who is who shares my values politically and we're on the same page. I think what happens there is maybe that'll be a place for now, but eventually that's not going to be your place. It's not going to be a safe place to stay for good. And so I just think that we need to do a lot better to recognize and I think filter everything that we are looking at, the stories that we're consuming. And this is books too. Do you know what your kids read? Do you know what you read? Because the reality is this is not just the schemes of the devil are not just for what my kids watch. but it's for what I watch, and it's for what I read, and it's for what I put my time into as well. So I think that it's a lot. It's not as simple as I'll just find the alternative right now. The alternative, there may not be a good alternative right now. And so, yeah.
I mean, I think this is important too. Now, just for kicks, I've been listening to some post-millennial stuff. It makes me a little optimistic about the future, which is weird. Haven't jumped fully in. But one of the things Christ left us with was a command to disciple the nations, not to wait for the end of the world and hope for the worst to happen so that we can all, get excited. Things got terrible. Jesus must be coming soon. Well, what if he doesn't? It was pretty terrible in Poland in 1945. Jesus didn't come. So, we have an obligation to be as active as we can be in discipling the nations today. And so I would say, especially, people will confuse the political with the theological.
Yeah.
Support good Christian causes and Christian groups that have a really solid understanding of sound doctrine. Politics is going to move. And so you got to be really careful that you don't tie yourself to that. And then we start, we maybe need to think about a theology of corporations. It would be that'd be an interesting video to discuss. So much of the policy and things that we don't like about the workplace are set by corporations. You can't talk about God at the workplace. Well, why not? Well, because it's policy. Well, why don't we start a company where you can talk about religion at the workplace? Why don't we, and there are places like that, but we somehow have ceded so much to these corporations. It's almost like ceding it to foreign governments at this point in time. But what stops you, Christian, who's complaining about this, from starting your own business and get very local and get very specific on Christian causes? Other religions do this a lot better than we do, because again, we're always afraid of the world saying, oh no, you're not buying into that big, wonderful thing. We have to start thinking 100% different about a lot of these things. Not 100%, but.
But you know what? You bring up something that I think is interesting. So we had Dennis Pethers from the Rooftop Ministries out here about a month ago. Fascinating. And if I can find out where to put it in, if you're interested in evangelism, I think he's a great guy to hear. But Dennis was in Africa. He was talking about what was happening in Mombasa. And that the on the ground, what was taking place was, he said, typically it was about a 50-50. You're either Muslim or Christian city, right? And the locals were saying, but the Muslims are coming full swing, and looks like they're going to win the day. And here's the reason why, right? Because what happens is, he says, the Muslims come in and they buy all the buildings, and then they begin to change the way the buildings look to look more Islamic. So then immediately now, when you look at the city, you look at it and you say, wow, this is a very Islamic city already. There's a vibe to it that begins to look like that. And he says, then they're very specific about businesses and who's in those businesses. They're very specific about trying to have people in places of power in government. And I think, a lot of the time we don't think about doing that, about influence that we could have by having a business in an area and what that could look like, or the influence it could be by actually engaging. Look, here's the deal. Christ is not going to expand his kingdom through the government. Okay. That's not how that works. Anytime you link government and church together, you end up with something probably not what you want. Right. However, that there should be I think a strategy for churches to say, how am I going to affect change here locally? What am I doing with my school board? What am I doing with the businesses here? All that. How do we begin to have a plan for our cities, for our county, our states, where the Christians begin to have some influence in what they're doing, and shine the light that way, instead of just doing what I think most of us do, which is, the country is, we'll just send our kids to the public school so they can be light in the darkness there. But don't ask the parents to do anything, because the parents sure as heck ain't going to bring any light, Anyways, I feel like we got a little off on this last part. But I do want to say, because I think we're winding down here, because I think the next big question has to come, as we're talking about corporations, Andrew, is, okay, so what does it mean for me financially to support a company that does not share my values anymore? And is it okay if you take a plan to say later on, right? Hey, I'm going to be very guarded about what I show my kids and what I bring into my house. but maybe you still feel like, okay, but now I'm burdened, right? Like, even maybe if I'm doing the best I can and I'm only showing certain things, right? But yeah, my subscription is still going there. Like, what is a Christian perspective of how we do with finance? So I want to tackle that in part 3. But I feel like today's been a good one to say, like, wake up and recognize that the devil has his scheme in all areas of life. And I think what you said was profound about the identity piece, creating an identity. And I think that's always the hardest, to root somebody out of that. But there's a scheme for everything. And are you aware of it? Do you recognize it's not just can I just say this? And I know you need to say this too, but I think even if there's no backroom discussion in the world behind the movie that you're watching or the show that you're watching, recognize that if it's in the world, that there is a behind the scenes spiritual room conversation going on about influencing people to do what they need to do to begin to expand the schemes of the devil. I guess the line that illustrates it is like the Screw Tape Letters of Lewis, right? Where he talk about the demon that's associated with each person, how to like draw them away. And you got to think about that in a cosmic level, right? Is that happening? I think it is. And I think there are dark forces that are behind everything. And so they're having their backroom discussions, even if it's not humans that are doing it. So there you go.
Yeah, no, well said. And just bringing it back, Disney has announced formally, it's out there. There's no apology. They have an agenda. The agenda is to normalize the LGBTQIA plus in movies by increasing the presence and increasing the prominence of these characters, so as to normalize it in larger culture. That is the agenda. It's been stated. It hasn't been retracted. Do you want to be supporting a company that is out there? The first video we made, we were suspecting this is where it was going. It's now out there, and it's whatever you were waiting for to have to make a decision. It's today. We know enough. And so with regards to Disney and other places, God's called you to stewardship. What are you going to do with that? And I think that's where we kind of need to zero in next time.
But, because next time, because I think, man, we got to talk about, because here's the thing, we start getting this, because it's going to get beyond Disney as we talk about companies next week. But I think also, the same thing is too, what's the difference, right? Between and this is why I think the finance is so big. What if I don't buy the Disney Plus app, but I still use the Disney free app, right? And I still watch content and stuff like that. Is there a difference, right? In that, I think those are questions that you need to think through as a family, right? Of like, what am I going to do? And if you're going to watch things, do you have a filter? I think it is stupid for anybody to say, we'll just watch whatever and I'll let them. And then when they have questions, come to me. They're not coming to you because they're going to learn everything they learn from their shows, and that's it. And they're going to learn it from their friends. I think it's stupid to sit with your family and think, I will just explain immorality to them as we're watching it together. You ain't going to change that. You've introduced immorality. You've approved it. And your words about, it's not good, that's not going to help it. So, but then the question is, okay, so let's say I don't, and now I'm just, but maybe just a little bit, maybe I bought a movie. Is that okay? Right? Is it okay for me to buy even now? Let's say I get rid of the app. Is it okay for me to buy the old movies or things like that? Like, those are things I think we need to talk about, because you're going to wrestle with the next piece of how do I support it, not by what I watch, but also by what I buy. And I think we have to really talk through that too.
And I'll say this, just off of that, if you wrestle with it, you're already doing an angelic thing. You're actually entering into an intelligent discussion here. And when you put it on the table, it takes the power away to some degree. And so what's been going on kind of underneath the scenes, and we weren't really paying attention, if you'll actually take the effort to prayerfully consider it, God will give you some solutions. And it's not going to be the same for every household. But that would be the challenge I would say that we're trying to make is, don't be stupid. Don't be ignorant. Engage, and then trust the Holy Spirit to guide you into the right track for you and your household.
Hey, man. Well, that is, I think, as best as we could say it right now. You ready to close this out, and then we'll get ready for next week? Hopefully we'll find time. Next week's gonna be a busy week. We'll try to knock it out though, because Easter's coming. I want to finish this what about Disney? What do I do with my finances? Kind of a conversation, but you ready to be done?
Go ahead. Close this out.
Let's do it. May the Lord bless you and protect you. May the Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord look with favor upon you and give you peace. God bless you guys. Thanks for watching, listening. And hey, just a reminder, if you're seeing this on either my channel right now, Theological Sidebars, or you're listening to it there, or you're on Dr. Marquez's and you're a bigger fan of his than if you are of mine, that's okay. We're going to be dropping these in our videos, links we are combining. And the OTXNT show, the channel has been created. You'll go one-stop shop to get Andrew or me and the OTXNT show. So we're going to be winding up what we do here on our individual channels, and you'll get everything from me and him there. So look for it, the link. I think I got to go like this because it's going to flip it around. So, or this, whatever one you'll see in just a second up there on the YouTube screen. If you're watching on podcast or listening, you won't know what I'm talking about, but it's okay. All right, man. So we'll see you on the channel. See you later.
All right. Okay. Take care,
bye-bye.
everyone.